The peace of Christ be with you, and welcome to worship for Pacific Spirit United Church for Sunday, June 14th. This is a long season, sometimes known as ordinary time, for all the Sundays that follow the celebration of Pentecost, right up until we begin the season of Advent. At Pacific Spirit, for the month of June, we are following a bit of a theme, and that is living intentionally in the digital world and different aspects of the work we do, the way we connect through these virtual means. I want to share with you that we had a congregational meeting this week, and it was so wonderful to see so many faces on the Zoom screens. And at that congregational meeting, we did decide, after some discussion, to extend the terms of our council and committee members to December 31st, 2020. We discussed that that might not mean we don't hold another congregational meeting before that. And in fact, council has made a commitment to start thinking about nominations and start putting things in process for a meeting sometime in the fall when we can perhaps elect a new slate of officers. As we gather in our separate places, I acknowledge that most of us are gathering to worship on the unceded and ancestral territories of the Musqueam, the Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh people. We also acknowledge that always when we gather to worship, we think about Christ's presence in our midst, and we symbolize that by lighting a bright light, a light of hope, the light that can lead us on this journey of faith and this journey of life. Let us now prepare our hearts and minds to worship God. Amen. Where two or three are gathered in my name, I am there, I am there. Where two or three are gathered in my name, I am there, I am there. Sometimes this digital world in which we live is dizzying, and the virtual feels disembodied and somehow devoid of humanity. Sometimes our screens bring only images of division and dis-ease, violence and injustice. And we yearn for compassion and healing and your loving holy presence, O God. Where two or three are gathered in my name, I am there, I am there. Where two or three are gathered in my name, I am there, I am there. This life we live is more than the beating of a single heart. It is about connection and communion, a shared smile, a shared grief, a shared prayer, a shared hope, and a shared passion for justice. Collect us and connect us, O God, that we might feel your Spirit moving through all and every means, that we might be enabled to lean into the possibilities and live with intention and grace and hope. Where two or three are gathered in my name, I am there, I am there. Where two or three are gathered in my name, I am there. I am there.
What does the Lord require of you? What does the Lord require of you? Justice, kindness, walk humbly with your God. To seek justice and love kindness, and walk humbly with your God. What does the Lord require of you? What does the Lord require of you? Justice, kindness, what does the Lord require of God? What does justice, kindness, what does walk humbly with your God? To seek justice and love kindness, and walk humbly with your God. To seek justice and love kindness, and walk humbly with your God.
Scripture reading for today comes from Micah chapter 6 verses 6 to 8 and from 1 John chapter 3 verses 14 to 18. Micah chapter 6 verses 6 to 8. With what shall I come before the Lord and bow myself before God on high? Shall I come before him with burnt offerings, with calves a year old? Will the Lord be pleased with thousands of rams and with 10,000 rivers of oil? Shall I give my firstborn for my transgression, the fruit of my body for the sin of my soul? He has showed you, O man, what is good, and what does the Lord require of you, but to do justice and to love kindness and to walk humbly with your God. And the first letter to John, chapter 3, verses 14 to 18. We know that we have passed out of death into life because we love the brethren. He who does not love abides in death. Anyone who hates his brother is a murderer, and you know that no murderer has eternal life abiding in him. By this we know love, that he laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for him and for the brethren. But if anyone has the world's goods and sees his brother in need, yet closes his heart against him, how does God's love abide in him? Little children, let us not love in word or speech, but in deed and in truth. Here ends the scripture lesson for today.
This week, we are going to continue our exploration of how we might encounter the sacred in the world of the digital. Last week, we talked about prayer and praying with others near and far. And this week, we will explore living out our faith through social action and encouraging people to connect with one another over the internet as they work for justice causes, again, near and far. Ever since I was employed by the United Church Division of World Outreach, as it was then known in the early 1990s, I have been aware that people find social justice engagement more fulfilling when they can participate in a hands-on way, or at least a personal connection kind of way. We used to have endless discussions at wider church meetings about how frustrating it was. And some of our folks preferred to give to something like an Adopt a Child program that came with a photo of your child and personal letters, rather than being willing to just give to the larger mission and service fund that supported so many worthwhile projects that work for global justice, perhaps in a bigger, broader kind of way. To be fair, however, it does seem true that we all need to feel the work that we do and the gifts that we give are making a real, tangible difference in the world. So all this makes me think that it might be even more difficult to feel that connection when one is merely clicking on a website to donate to support some good work, or to add your name to a petition or letter writing campaign, rather than actually engaging with people, being able to perhaps stand shoulder to shoulder with people who share your passions and want to work together to see God's justice lived out in our world. The demonstrations against racism taking place in North America and internationally in recent weeks show us how powerful is the need to gather together to have a collective voice in the face of injustice. People have literally risked their health to gather in these large groups, some saying that racism is a pandemic and health hazard as severe and frightening as is the coronavirus. Our beloved Dr. Bonnie Henry has encouraged the protesters in BC to find ways to perhaps gather in smaller groups or in virtual ways. But I hazard to guess there would not be the same opportunities for voicing one's concerns and feeling that one's voice was heard. And there would not be the same feeling of solidarity with those who share one's passions. And yet maybe different and in some ways unsatisfying though it is, I think we are called to use this time and the medium of the internet to inform ourselves and to search out opportunities for engagement with the world through online means. The technology does give us the facility to connect with people in far-flung places, and indeed can bring to us truly global connections. I invite you now to listen as I engage in a time of sacred inquiry with Jean McTavish. Jean has been involved with our outreach committee and with many aspects of seeking social justice, from fair trade coffee to welcoming refugees, to reconciliation work, to drawing down our harmful impact on the climate. Jean is a wise, generous, committed seeker of justice who knows how to walk her talk. Jean, I really want to thank you for being willing to be in conversation about social justice, how our faith might lead us to social action in the world. And I know you've been very involved in many aspects, so I wonder if you can just let folks know to begin with the kind of things you've been involved in.
So with the church, it's likely what pulled me to be with the church is because there were other people interested in things I was interested in. Outreach has been my home, and in outreach, I think of initially a lot of interactions with First United. We took on the women's shelter. We've been involved with refugee sponsorship, and more recently quite active with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And my most recent piece that I'm quite passionate about is efforts to look at climate change and bringing in the people from Drawdown who are supported by the Pachamama Alliance. So those are all the pieces, I think.
I bet there's one or two more, but they may come up in our conversation. So I am wondering how some of that work has changed in this time of sheltering in place and in this time of having to go to meetings, make connections, even do the work through computer, through virtual ways. So I'm interested in sort of what you find have been the celebrations of working virtually and what have been the cautions or the hardships of having to use the internet.
I think the celebration for me has certainly been the opportunity to focus, to take away all the extra bits and pieces that come up in life and actually focus into that possibility of work that we do personally around social responsibility. A lot of it is, for me, is learning, exposure. The last piece that I mentioned with Drawdown and their affiliation with the Pachamama Alliance has been the most amazing and exciting for me in this time because they offer courses, no charge, by donation only. And it has been such an amazing expansion on my own time, whenever I choose, in the middle of the night if I wanted to, or from whatever location, as long as I have internet, to learn about so many aspects of work and social responsibility. Because the Pachamama Alliance brings together those three pieces that for me were important. They say they work towards a environmentally sustainable, a socially responsible, and a spiritually fulfilling world for humans on this planet. So it all comes together, and the technology in particular has allowed me to go down so many fascinating rabbit holes that and end up learning about people like Buckminster Fuller, who has some very inspirational things to say around if you lived, I can't quote him exactly, but if you knew that the way you live your life in this world would make a difference to humanity and how it progresses, how would you live your life? And it's he's someone I did not pay attention to for anything like that in his days. For some of the other pieces in terms of change, the women's shelter and First United have been more, I would say, difficult to make the contact, partly because both of those organizations are always in transition themselves. And First United I think we're at a stage of change there, and we're not sure what role we play. And so it's been harder to have those conversations. And they're also very focused on just keeping people alive and healthy. So they haven't really got time to be in discussion. The refugee work has been quite, I think, difficult. I would use the word only because, you know, our most recent refugees were barely here. They came the end of January. So their ability to understand what life was like in Canada, and for us to build some relationship with them was absolutely kind of cut off. Yes, we were getting them, and even their language lessons got transferred to being online. But for one of them, it didn't work. The one who had more English was able to kind of transfer and basically is, you might say, totally functional, learning English or improving English, and also taking a university course out of the States, which was happening before, you know, they arrived. But for someone who comes in, doesn't have the language, and is totally alone other than their partner, doesn't know anybody else here, and it seems to have really compounded the difficulty of arriving. And we, as much as we can try and go and sit and have coffee at a distance in someone's backyard, it's pretty hard when you don't share a language.
Yeah, it's when
So-
nonverbal communication really
That's right.
play a
And
role.
so how do you learn to trust?
Mm.
You know, and how do you know, how can we help people in that situation to relax and allow us to try to, you know, hold their hand, and which is one thing we just can't do. So how it just takes time and to build that kind of trust, and that seems to be a particular difficulty in the current situation. And other than that, the refugee work has, of course, all kind of movement out of countries has been totally stopped. So that will all be backlogged in a system that we already knew was really suffering from long delays. So that one's been hard. The Truth and Reconciliation one is, again, I was just thinking about how powerful some of the events that we coordinated, or mostly Maggie Hosgood coordinated, where something like the blanket exercise. Well, that would be something that we couldn't do in these times. That doesn't say we can't be planning, and it doesn't say that it isn't an excellent time for that self-evaluation, that self-change, that questioning that we all need to do on that whole topic. And I'm really struck right now by the current energy around the anti-racist and the Black Lives Matters movement, that for us in Canada, the kind of equivalent or the really powerful piece is around our response to our Indigenous population, and how, especially if we're white with European stock, there's a lot of reflection that has to happen. So whether people take this opportunity to use it or not, it certainly comes at me rather dramatically.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I noticed in this month of June, where there is June 21st, Aboriginal Day, that there's a number of online opportunities to engage. The United Church is having something every Sunday afternoon, and I know many groups are putting out, I think it was called a virtual powwow even online. So there are ways to engage with the issue, and like you say, do some self-reflection.
Yeah, and I think that that's the piece that I always am questioning is how do we move our thinking into action?
Mm.
And so this is a great opportunity to do, you know, that self work. But as you know, we look at the climate change work, things that actually need us not, I think as one person put it, not to be sitting in the stands. We need to be, you know, playing. We need to be in the game. And obviously with the Truth and Reconciliation, you can see in the Indigenous work, we do need to be in the game now. You know, we've had a lot of time, and people, I heard one person say, "What do you mean you don't know what to do or you don't know how to help? How come? Why haven't you been paying attention? How come you don't know?" And it's sort of like they now talk about it's not good enough to raise your children as not seeing color, being colorblind. No, you need to talk about color, and you need to you need to be part of the answer, not just waiting for something to happen. So it all as usual, social responsibility gets all mixed in together.
Things are connected to one another. So in this time of functioning virtually, have there been some new learnings for you? Some ways of doing things that you hadn't expected beforehand?
There's more been, I suppose, some emphasis on kind of what is important. I would use the, and I may not have mentioned this before, just the work with through Cafe Justicia and bringing coffee in from Guatemala. There was recently, because of the pandemic, I don't know if people have been reading about it, but certainly in Guatemala is hit very hard for a whole bunch of different reasons, not the least of which is a lot of our migrant workers come from Guatemala, and they certainly got caught in both ends of whether they could travel in or out of their country or in or out of Canada. But about 10 days ago, there was a webinar for the people, well, anybody who wanted, but I obviously heard about it through Cafe Justicia and BC Casa, who brings in the coffee. And it was with the head of the CCDA, which is the organizer for the coffee growers in Guatemala. And he asked for the webinar, and on this end, on the Canadian end, there was people from the Maritimes all the way through to here in BC who were on. They managed to have it was a Zoom call, but there was a translator because he obviously spoke in Spanish, and he had one of the other members of his group, a woman who's in a large leadership role. And I was just thinking about how the people involved, how, at this time that we still have a way to get together, and for him to be able to reach out and say, it is so important that you are still there for us. We know we can't go back and forth, but when you speak out about things that we talk about here that are going very wrong for us, it works. It is important to us, and the fact that you walk with us, it keeps us going. And I was thinking, it works because you know, the webinar, even though there's a distance there, if you didn't know anybody, of course, you would kind of wonder. But I personally have met him, and I saw him when he, again, with another combination here, was when I went with the Healing Hands group to Guatemala with Sharon Yetman from the North Shore. We happened to go and see him in Congress. So he, for one period, he was actually got elected into the Congress. So I've met him when I was grinding coffee some years ago, and he would come up. But of course, I don't speak Spanish, and he doesn't speak English. So, but it's a piece that, you know, you already have the connection. You're not having to make it through the Zoom call. But it's so important in terms of staying connected and just being able to continue to see where you go with what action or work you need to do. So that it wasn't something new, but it was a kind of different emphasis for me. The ahas were just, as I said, being in an online program that I chose to be in was called the Game Changer Intensive. So it's called, okay, so you're concerned about climate change. Let's look at how you move forward. And a lot of it had to do with, you know, your self-development and reflection and things that you needed to commit to and ideas for going forward. The information and the education was so expansive. People I'd never heard of, that when I went and looked at the things they'd written or they'd said, just knocked my socks off. It was amazing. And it would cross-reference. So many people will know I'm not well read. I have not in my lifetime taken time to read. But I know that people would come up, and I would have heard somebody from, say, the contemplative prayer people talk about this person, or I would have heard somebody else, you know, from a totally different kind of area. As I said, that's where Buckminster Fuller came up. Like, wow. So it was very exciting. And that organization has been, Pachamama Alliance has been a real inspiration, because they continue all through this pandemic. They have been putting out weekly, they put webinars together, and sometimes 300 people are online from all over the world. And they have, you know, they've got different members of their board of directors. And they're all, when you look at them, they're all very interesting people from different parts. One of them is a Black minister that comes on and speaks once in a while. And, you know, fortunately, they record them, because you can go back and re-listen, because you're going, wow, that was a lot of sort of new ideas or new ways of looking at things. So that's been my excitement of the internet. And yeah, I mean, I started that course before the pandemic hit us. In fact, I was finished the course before it did, but I put a couple of other people, I convinced a couple other people to get on it during the pandemic, because it runs every, 10 weeks maybe. And I know a couple of people were absolutely thrilled to have that piece as their, you know, kind of keep them going.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you for all those ideas and sharing what this time has meant for your engagement with social justice. I'm wondering if you would be willing, maybe we can put out your email or something if people are interested in following up on some of these things they've heard about. Maybe engaging with the Drawdown program around climate change, or getting more involved with the Fair Trade Coffee or anything like that. Would you be willing?
Yes, that is fine. I'm always excited to find that, because you often put things out and nothing comes back. So I don't know whether people have email overload or So I'm more than willing to accept. And the coffee sales continue.
Okay. Let's do a little commercial here at the end. Well, thank you for continuing in
Okay.
all the good works that you do in seeking justice in this world, seeking health for this world. And thank you also for being willing to chat with me today.
Okay. You're welcome.
Die Luft ist blau, das Tal ist grün, die kleinen Maienglocken blühen und Schlüsselblumen drunter. Der Wiesengrund ist schon so bunt und malt sich täglich bunter und malt sich täglich bunter. Drum komme, wem der Mai gefällt, und schaue froh die schöne Welt und Gottes Vatergüte. Die solche Pracht hervorgebracht, den Baum und seine Blüte, den Baum und seine Blüte.
The beautiful way that he delivers in service and the wonderful way in which he engages the congregation, you know, sharing in that good news and having everybody equally participate and contribute. It's a beautiful thing. I love that about that church. And then the discussion, the freedom to speak and share.
I'm very proud to visit Canada with one of my great-great-grandmother, Mr. Cherokee Indian.
Thank you.
Programs we've had, like an out-of-school care program that we've had in the basement, and they also have access to the upstairs as well. It's been around for over 25 years, and so we've enjoyed them as one of our chief tenants.
Barry has a variety of programs and services he provides. 12-step programs, there's AA, Al-Anon, children of alcoholics, post-traumatic stress disorder, and they have a talking circle.
All the people in the neighborhood come at one point or other. A lot of the folks from downtown, they're because it's a native church. They're aware that we're here.
We try to provide a weekly lunch after our service, and people aren't obliged to come to the service to join us for lunch, simply because we're encouraging people to sit down and talk to one another, although that's not mandatory either. Sometimes it's over with as soon as people can gobble down a bowl of soup and or a full course meal. Well, a mission and service grant to the Longhouse Ministry has always been important. Definitely grateful for the funds received, because as we say in our yearly application for that, our yearly grant submission, we probably couldn't exist without it, certainly not for very long.
The World Student Christian Federation, the WSCF, was founded with the aim of uniting movements or associations of Christian students throughout the world. It's a global community of student Christian movements committed to dialogue, ecumenism, social justice, and peace.
My name is Winfred Mutheo Mutua.
I'm Jennifer Muthoki Mutua.
I'm Felix Maina.
My name is Edwin Miano.
My name is Isaac Mwambua.
My name is Alex Chege.
The Africa Regional Office of the WSCF in Nairobi, Kenya, coordinates the efforts of over 20 national movements across the continent, inspiring young people to meet the challenges of their generation through dialogue and building leadership from an informed Christian perspective.
I am currently heading the Student Christian Movement of Kenya. In Student Christian Movement of Kenya, we have a passion for young girls and especially the adolescent girls. So we have Winfred, who has been working closely with the young girls, and we worked with her in executing the Adolescent Girls and Young Women project.
I got an opportunity to work through the organization in executing the program. It was focusing on HIV and AIDS and gender-based violence.
One of the greatest challenges that Kenya is facing currently is drug abuse.
Through the conference, NACADA, National Authority Campaign Against Drug and Alcohol Abuse, we were able to be taught new methods and exchange knowledge on how we can further our motive and our agendas of eradicating the drug use problem in the societies.
In Machakos County, where we just go and share bread with the street kids. Then after we share with them, we talk to them and then engage with them, know the kind of drugs they are using, and then learn and understand how we can help them.
We can help the youth to nurture their talents.
For example, if someone has a talent in maybe innovations and maybe dancing, we train them on how they can use their talents to start their own businesses.
Through the work of the Holy Spirit, the WSCF is called to be a prophetic witness in church and society, and is inspiring young Kenyans to build a world founded on justice and peace.
I'm grateful to the United Church of Canada for the opportunity that they gave WSCF, because it is through that I joined the organization. I have grown, I have become a better person, and I've been able to put this entire group. So, Asante Sana UCC.
Your contributions to the Mission and Service Fund of the United Church of Canada help partners like the World Student Christian Federation in their vital work with youths across Africa. Thank you, and please continue to give.
Great God of ongoing creation, we are thankful for the promise of spring, for warm weather and drenching rains which stimulate the growth of garden plants and flowers, of healthy, fresh foods to nourish our bodies, to meet the challenges of this world. We are challenged by a novel and deadly coronavirus, in response to which wise public health officials have told us to stay in our homes. We accepted that advice to protect ourselves and others, to prevent the spread and damage that the virus can cause. We pray for safety and success for those working as quickly as possible to develop a responsive vaccine. We are saddened and concerned then to necessarily be separated from our loved ones, away from senior generations in care facilities, family members in a hospital or hospice, and our supportive friends with whom we share our thoughts and hopes and plans, as well as a good joke and a warm hug. Support us in loneliness and unanswerable concerns for the vital presence of those we love. Surround all of those we love and those who do not feel they are loved with your kindness, justice, and loving care. The pandemic has disrupted the ability of many to work or to operate businesses, to make essential income to support themselves and their families. We have come to learn the deep anguish felt by many for present and future economic circumstances. Recent graduates from educational programs were looking forward to bright futures, and exciting grad ceremonies which have now been replaced by Zoom grads and drive-by parades in front of adoring parents and families. We know that some have had their hopes dashed or put on hold for what must appear an eternity. Lord, support and comfort those folks in your loving arms. The death of George Floyd and the protests of that death and other deaths have been marked in this last week. The desperate words of the unnamed who were killed included others who said these words: "Officers, why do you have your guns out? What are you doing following me? Mom, I'm going to college. I don't have a gun. Stop shooting. You shot me. You shot me. It's not real. It's not real. And I can't breathe." Those words and events at which they were uttered have led your world to a crossroads where old understandings must be thrown aside. Understandings which led to discriminations based on the color of skin, racial origin, lack of cultural appreciation, sexual orientation, poverty, and causes that many of us do not appreciate. We know the command going forward is simple. Seek justice for all, love and act with kindness, and always be aware that we are walking in your presence. Give us the wisdom and compassion to make change, admit failings, and follow the command in all we do and say every day and in every breath we take. We are aware of those facing illness, addiction, family disruption, and mental health challenges. We're praying today for healing and return to good health of Sylvia Meikle and Ruth McClellan, each recovering in hospital from surgery for a broken hip. We give thanks for the leaders of this congregation, for Maggie, Deborah, and Kathy, and Brian, and Bryn, all others leading our council and committees, as well as those who pull weeds and drive nails. We look forward to having a new roof soon on this house of worship. We ask you to keep our roofers safe as they do the work on the steep roof. In the Pacific Mountain Region Cycle of Prayer, we ask your blessing and support, O God, for the congregation of Zion Armstrong United Pastoral Charge and its minister, the Reverend Franklin James. And let us join together in the words of the prayer that Jesus taught his disciples, saying,
We are called to participate in the healing of the nations, in actions large and small, in places near and far. May God guide us to do so in ways that are meaningful and helpful and make a real difference in the world. And as we leave this place of worship, I invite you to go out into the world with a daring and a tender love. The world is waiting. Go in peace. And may the blessing of God, who brings justice, mercy, and love, abide with you this day and always. Amen.